times, because my father was a cab driver, so I used to take a ride with him to Shorot. There were Jewish schools, there were Czech schools, there were Russian schools. And then the Jewish people stopped going to schools because of they wouldn't let Jews in the school. And as far as I know, all the Jewish kids were only at home. Nobody, like after 6 o'clock, a Jew wasn't allowed to go on the streets. So everybody stayed in their houses. Well, in 1944, in April, they took us to Ushhorod in the ghetto, and we were there till May. In May, they took us to Auschwitz. So I know there were terrible things because there was a Judenrat that I know, but the names of the Judenrat I wouldn't know. So what else can I... For instance, in my place where I've lived, Seredne, that's near Ushhorod, even the neighbors, they were against us. They used to beat us up. They used to when the Germans came in or the Hungarian came in, they used to point at the Jews. This is a Jewish person, and they made all kinds of troubles for the Jews. Like, for instance, they told the Hungarian police that my brother took some people to Russia, to the how do you call it? Let me just think. That my brother took some people to the border to go to Russia, and he was beaten up terribly. He was in the Hungarian police beat him up, and then they arrested my mother that she should tell how many times my brother went to the borders, which wasn't true. My brother didn't go at all. He didn't take any people, and he was in prison. And then when the Germans came in, they said to the Jews to bring all the valuable things in. And we had cabs, so my younger brother took all, whatever we had. And they beat him up there in Ushhorod because they said that he didn't bring enough. We probably have more, and he didn't bring enough. So they kept him there for 2 days and beaten him to death. And then my cousin had a cab too, in the same time in Seredne, and they told him to bring all the stuff into Ushhorod, which he did. And they beat him up, and they brought him back to Seredne and threw him out of the cab, of the car that they brought him back. And the very next day they took us to the ghetto. And there were all kinds of horrible things that they just made up stories. The neighbors, our neighbors, the non-Jewish people, and they told that this one robbed him or took away from him things which wasn't true. But for that reason, they were beaten up and they were taken to prison.
Where did you go to school? In Seredne?
In Seredne.
What was it? A Hebrew school or a Jewish school?
No, they were... when I went to school was first a Catholic school. And we had private lessons from a rabbi. Our rabbi gave us private lessons in Jewish to read and to write. Mm-hmm. And when they had their prayers in the Catholic schools, the Jewish kids were sent out. And then later on, that was in 1929-30. But then the Jewish people opened up a Czech school, which we learned Czech, German, and Jewish. So the Jewish children, most of them went there. There was a Russian school too, only for boys, but the Jewish kids, they didn't take in there. So we went, girls and boys, to the Czech school. Then the Hungarians came in 1938. First the Ukraine. And so the kids went for a couple of days, only certain days to school, the Jewish kids, but in 1939 they stopped completely the Jewish kids going to school. For instance, I have a sister, she was born in 1928, So she was only like 10, 11 years old. She didn't go to school at all.
And the Catholic school was a state school or was it a private school?
A nun school. The nuns had the school. It was like a public school here, but there were no other schools except the Catholic school.
Uh-huh.
So the Jewish boys had a cheder, a special school for the boys, so which they used to go in the morning, and then to the Catholic school, and after the Catholic school they went back to cheder.
And was it a religious community?
Very religious, very religious. Every Jew was strictly Shomer Shabbos, strictly. There was not one Jew without a sheitel or without a payas. There was no such thing.
Do you remember the name of the rabbi?
Our rabbi's name was Adler.
And was there a religious life that went on?
Yes, we had a shul in every morning. The man went to shul, and in the evening, every evening, Friday of course, Saturday all day. Very religious, very, very religious, very strict.
Until when?
Until 1944, and they went secretly to the shul. But in 1944, they couldn't go to shul no more.
So nobody bothered them until 1944?
No. Well, they broke their windows in the shul, but they still went to shul. Because they were so religious that they wouldn't stay out from the shul. Except when, they broke their... some men were beaten up on the street going home or into the shul. From just from the neighbors there.
And there was kosher slaughter, there was everything.
Oh yes, shaykhet with kosher butchers, but only till 1939. In 1940 we had no, we had a shaykhet, but we had no meat. We had only chickens that the shaykhet used to slaughter, yes.
And this was, in 1939, was official or was in secret?
No, this was official. They knew about it.
And everything was official until 1944?
Right. In Seredne was an organization called the Agudat Yisrael. So the older generation, not me, like 25, those girls and boys belonged to the Aguda, and they had, they got together and they tried to get to Israel. One of the boys from all the organizations escaped to Israel in 1942 or 43. But the others, they were so religious that the rabbi said it's against to go to Israel. Those years, they were so religious that they didn't believe in, that was Palestine then, because they were afraid that they will not keep the Jewish faith, So I didn't belong to any organization because even Aguda wasn't good enough for my parents. They were so strict. And most of, in Seredne, it was only like, the older generation that the parents couldn't say nothing to them, because the parents were so Hasidic that Agudat Yisrael wasn't good enough. So only one of the boys, against his parents' will, he escaped to Israel, to those days Palestine. Mm-hmm. And he is still religious yet. When I visited him, he is in the Mizrahi, and he lives in Kfar Saba, near Tel Aviv. What's the name? Let me think. It's not Kfar Saba. Let me think where he is. It's near Tel Aviv. He still lives in Ramat Gan and very religious. He worked for the Histadrut, but he is in the Mizrahi. He's like, participates in the Mizrahi. At home, he belonged to the Agudas Yisrael.
Is there anything else that you can remember either about Usharat or about Seredna from when you were a little girl?
They
Who were
had
the people that were important in the community? What kind of people they were? What they did?
They were so poor in the place where I come from. All the Jews were so poor. There was maybe one that was, let's say, wealthy. Here he would be poor, but there, compared to the other families, they were very poor. Very poor. My father made hardly a living. We were 14 children, you can imagine, if he had his own cab. So how much could he make? But listen, we had more than other people. For, you know, we considered to be the middle class because my father worked and we had everything wherever we needed. But we weren't wealthy, you know. We were middle class.
Was there a kehila?
Yes.
Do you remember who was in it?
Well, everybody, all the Jews were. We were only about 100 Jewish families, not even in Seredne.
And do you remember for Usharat?
No. Not. Yes. Well, in April 24th or 22nd, they took us to Usharat, to the ghetto. We were there for about 4 weeks, and then they took us to Auschwitz. In Auschwitz I was 5 weeks, and then from there they took me to Lüberstedt. It was a camp where we were only 500 girls, and we were beaten every week. Every single week, they made us come to a place where everybody was beaten up for no reason. We worked very hard. We got up 5 o'clock in the morning till 8 in the evening. And in the morning, we had only black coffee, nothing else. Lunchtime, they gave us a little soup. But the soup, I can't tell you what kind of soup it was. I felt like stones in it. And in the evening we had a little soup and a slice of bread. And that went on for a year. And it was bitter cold all winter long. When I first arrived to Auschwitz, the very first night, they took all the clothes away from us, of course. The shoes they let us keep. But somebody stole my shoes and I was barefooted all this time in the 4 weeks that I was in Auschwitz. 5 weeks, I don't even remember exactly. Well, and I was naked for 2 weeks in Auschwitz because they took us always to take a shower. And sometimes there weren't enough dresses to give me, you know, for everybody. So I was too naked for 2 weeks, naked and barefooted for 2 weeks. And in Lüberstedt I worked very hard. We worked in a munition factory, but we didn't work in the factory. They took like 13 girls to a truck, and we had to take the munitions from the basement, from the factory, unload the truck, and then instead of gas, we were pulling the truck to another place, to a bunker, where we had to take all the munitions. There were 30 pounds a box, and we had to take them down to another bunker. And that we did for months. And when they had no work in the munition factories, so we chopped wood. And then the last 2 days, 3 days before because they said the Russians are coming, they're not far from here. So they took us one night in trains, I don't know where. I have no idea which way and where, But being that we were in the trains and they had munition on like the last couple of trains, so 180 girls were killed from the bombs. The English or the American were bombing the trains. So 180 girls got killed, and some of them lost their legs, their arms. So I think we were only about 200 left from the 500. And they took us then, well, we were in the Germans took us places that I don't know. I have no idea where we were. Not in states or cities, just in the woods. They were hiding, so they kept us with them. And then they wanted to kill us, so they put us in wagons and they wanted to push us in the ocean. There was like here is the river. But there were two girls, probably older than I was, and they said not to go with them. Let's fight, let's start fighting. But who had strength to fight? We didn't eat for so many days. They gave us only raw potatoes. Everybody had a raw potato for 2 days. So we were biting the raw potatoes. We had diarrhea. Everybody was sick, we had no strength to fight. But one of the girls, I don't know where she got the strength from, and she was, she started to fight with one SS, and she hit him and he hit her back, of course. But they threw all their munitions into the ocean, so they had nothing to fight with, they could have killed us easy, but they had nothing with them already. Because we saw some of the SS that they were with us, they put up Red Cross bands, on their arms, in case the Americans come, that they should be able to say that they weren't SS. They changed their clothes, they took off their clothes, they were in civilian clothes. We were so stupid and so weak that we didn't even had in mind to capture them, to keep them, not to let them go. We let them all go. And we were like in, where you keep the animals. What is it?
Barn? A
In
stable?
a barn. In a stable. We stayed there until we saw men, and they said they're from France. They told us not to go no place because the Americans are coming. They are a mile away. So we stayed there until we saw some English officers, and they asked, they took us then away. They took us it was from the military, in a camp where the Germans had a camp, and they put us in there, and they gave us food. Not much, because they said we're not allowed to eat much. And some of them they put in the hospitals. And I was fortunately lucky that they didn't have to take me to a hospital. And then they took us to, I think Bremen was it. I have no idea. Where we were there stationed, and they took us in a place, I don't recall the name. It was like a country place where we should build up ourselves. So they gave us plenty of food, and they gave us old clothing, some of them were torn, and we had no underwear or something. So we got some from them. And then we, in the military, where we were in the camp there, in the German camp, we had covers, blankets. So we took the blankets with us, and we stayed there for about 2 months. And then they asked us where we want to go. We want to go to a home, or we can come to America. We can go to England, the younger ones. Well, most of them said they want to go home because they figured maybe they'll find somebody there. So I was between them that I went back to, not to Seredni, but I went to Uzhhorod. And when I arrived to Uzhhorod, my 2 brothers were there. One sister I had in Uzhhorod in the hospital because she was very young, and they brought her home very sick. She was in the hospital for 3 months. So my father was home, my aunt, his sister, my 2 cousins, And we stayed in Uzhhorod, but the Russians were there, so we couldn't stay there. You couldn't stay there because they couldn't care less if you were Jew or not. They treated everybody equally. They took from you everything, whatever you had. I had a couple of pieces of bread. When I arrived to Uzhhorod, they took even the pieces of bread away from me. And I said, I come from concentration, I take it home because I heard my father is home. Somebody told me in Prague already. So I figured maybe my father is hungry. I should give him a piece of bread. They took that away from me too. So I stayed with my father, my two brothers, and we took care of the sister in the hospital. And then 3 months later, I came home in October, November, December. In December, I left Uzhhorod I went to Prague, to Czechoslovakia back, with my sister and my two brothers. And later on, my father came with his sister. So we were in Prague, and then we were looking for jobs. We worked there. I worked in a factory until I got married in 1946 in September. My husband is a baker, so he worked in a bakery, and a year later I had my son. And then we moved to Israel in 1949. We were there for 10 years, till 1959. And then we came to the United States.
Were you in the same town before the ghetto was set up?
No, I was in Seredne.
Where were you between September 1st, 1939 and the establishment of the first ghetto you were in?
In Seredne.
When was the ghetto in Uzhhorod set up?
Probably in April.
In 44?
Right.
What anti-Jewish actions were taken before the ghetto was established, including pogroms?
I don't understand the question.
Was there anything, did they do anything bad to the Jews before they made the ghetto?
Yes.
Do you remember what?
Well, they used to make up stories like if somebody went to the police and said, like, for instance, my father has money. So, and he didn't give in everything what they asked to. So they just came and took him away and beat him up.
When did these things happen?
In 1944, in March, April.
This was organized by the Germans or by somebody else?
By the Hungarians.
By the Hungarians. And before the Hungarians?
The same thing. That was the Ukraine. They came in 1939. The same thing, 40, 41, 43, we were always afraid. The Hungarians and the Ukrainians, they used to beat up Jews on the streets, any place.
But this only started in 39. Before 39 it was quiet.
It was quiet.
Were there any pogroms?
What do you mean pogroms? That's not...
So there were no pogroms?
No.
Did any of your family live in the same ghetto with you?
The whole family.
What work did you do in the ghetto?
Nothing. We were in the ghetto doing nothing.
If you were a refugee in the ghetto from another place, and you were, what was the local inhabitants' attitude towards you? In other words, the people from Uzhhorod, what did they think of you?
Nothing. They were there too, from Uzhhorod, from Seredne, from all over.
Yeah, but
so we didn't talk to one another like, we were. Everybody was afraid what's going to be next.
But they weren't mean to you.
No.
Were they nice to you?
Yeah, the Jews, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Sure.
Was it allowed to leave the ghetto at first?
No.
Never?
Never.
What was the size of the ghetto?
Well, it was a factory of blocks, like where they used to build houses from, you know. They used to, that was a factory of cement blocks, and they put all the Jews there. It was like half a block big.
The whole ghetto was only half a block?
About a half a block, but thousands and thousands of people were there. From Ushhorod, from Seredne, from all the small towns around Ushhorod, they were all there. Well, we had like this kitchen, my kitchen, a space. You know, it was a big, tremendous place, and everybody had a small space, like every family. Like we were 16, 17 people.
And the kitchen is like is about 11 feet by 11 by
Right.
9 feet.
So we were sleeping like 8 in one side and feet to feet, like, you know.
Was there only one ghetto in the town of Ushhorod? Or
Only
were there
one
more?
ghetto.
Only one.
Yeah.
Was there a wall around the ghetto?
That was a wall because there was a factory, so that was closed up, you know.
What was it closed up with? A wall or
No,
a
not a
barbed
wall.
wire?
Wires.
With wires.
Wires. And they were Hungarian police watching, you know, on every corner.
They were only Hungarian police or some other kind of police too?
They were only Hungarians, but sometimes the Germans used to come in and check, you know, and to beat up the Jews. A lot of people were beaten there, mostly men. They shoot, there, you know, somebody tried to escape from there, they killed them. There were two women that I know of. They wanted to escape and they got caught and they killed them.
The Hungarians killed them or the Germans?
The Germans.
Did you know at that time what was going on outside of where the Nazis were?
No idea. We didn't know.
Were there any radios?
No.
Were there any underground newspapers or pamphlets?
Nothing. We couldn't get anything in.
Did you get any mail or send any mail?
No, we couldn't.
Did you know the truth about gas chambers and extermination?
No.
No.
No, we didn't know.
Did you or your family have any plans to escape?
We were afraid.
What did you eat in the ghetto?
What did we eat? We brought from home raw food, whatever we had left in the house, and when we were allowed like an hour to try to cook it outside, but if the Germans came in, they beat up the people that they had cooked food outside. But then the Jewish Judenrat made up a kitchen, and they cooked, and we had like once a day a hot meal, whatever they cooked. They set up a kitchen there, and they were, you know, people cooking, and everybody got like, you know, a plate of soup.
Where did they get the food from, the Judenrat?
That we have no idea.
Was it rationed?
What does it mean, rationed? The way it was, they knew, let's see, in this particular place, there was like, you know, separate rooms. Not separate rooms, like, you know, just closed up, like, let's see, for 500 families, you know, spaces. So they gave for that block, they gave, let's see, so much and so much food. So everybody was standing in line, and everybody got like a little soup.
Once a day?
Once a day.
And who gave out the soup? The Judenrat?
The Judenrat, the kitchen, you know. They set up the kitchen and they gave out the soup. They figured out in that particular 500 people need so much soup. And one of the, you know, the men in that particular area, like for instance, my father took us all and we were holding the plate wherever we had, and they gave us a little soup for each one of us.
Was there any coal or wood available for heating?
No,
So it was always cold.
always cold.
Were there any pre-war political parties there?
I don't know about any parties. Everybody was afraid, even to breathe,
This is before the war, though.
of course.
And
In the ghetto I'm talking about.
even before the ghetto, were there any political parties?
Not that I know of.
Do you know who the Jewish leaders were in the town before 1939? No.
No.
You don't know what happened to them during the war?
I have no idea.
Do you know how the first Judenrat was appointed?
I just heard about it because I used to ask my father who is giving us the soup. So he said this is a organization, Jews. They are called the Judenrat, and they, from where they got the money to buy the food or anything else, we don't know.
So you don't know anything about the Judenrat?
No.
Do you know anything about a Jewish police that we call the Ordnungsdienst? Were there any Jewish police?
Well, they were the Hungarians came in and they said, they picked out, let's say, 10 boys, and they said, you're gonna watch this particular group, but you have to beat them up if they do something wrong. Like, for instance, if they go out after 6 o'clock, even out from, there was no place to go anyway, so he should beat them up. So one time the Germans came, and the children were playing, they were a lot of children, playing outside the barracks, because the ground was big. So they said to the Jewish police, they were called Jewish police, why did you let the children play there? So they were beaten up.
The police were beaten up?
Yeah, from the Germans.
So who did the police report to? The Hungarians or the Germans or the Judenrat?
To whom they reported what?
Who was their boss?
The German police and the Hungarian, actually the Hungarian police. But SS, like German police came in.
And who was more important, the Jewish police or the Judenrat?
More important for what?
So who would listen to orders? Would it be that the police would listen to orders from the Judenrat?
The Judenrat. Judenrat.
Was more important.
Sure.
Camp questionnaire number 2 for Luberstedt. What date did you arrive in the camp?
That was we came to Auschwitz in May, in June, middle of June.
1944.
Right.
From where?
From Auschwitz.
And by what method of transportation?
Well, it's like the trains,
Cattle trains.
Cattle trains, of course.
Did you arrive alone or with members of your family?
Alone.
What had happened to the other members of your family?
What had happened? They all were young children, and they went with my mother.
Where? In Auschwitz?
In Auschwitz.
So they all died?
They all died.
And what about the others?
Well, my brothers, they I don't know where they were,
Mm-hmm.
We were separated. My mother took all the small children, and the older ones, like my 2 brothers, they went with my father.
You don't know where they went?
I know, I have no idea.
When you came to the camp, was there a selection?
In the camp?
Yeah.
No more.
No more.
In Auschwitz was a selection.
Yeah. Where was the camp located?
Near Bremen in Luberstedt.
And what was the size of the camp?
Well, we were only 500 girls.
What kind of guards did it have?
SS.
German.
German SS.
Only.
Men and women.
Only Germans,
Only Germans.
When was the camp first set up?
That I wouldn't know. When we came, the camp was set up. When we
already
arrived
there.
there, it was there already.
Do you know who the commander of the camp was?
I don't remember his name.
Do you remember any of the officers or any of the men?
I remember it was a little Maria, and the redhead Maria, and Gretel, but their second names I don't know.
What were they like?
SS women.
So they were all bad.
Very bad. Very, very bad.
How many Germans were there guarding the camp?
About 25.
Were they SS or were they
SS.
German something else?
SS.
SS. Do you remember any incidents that could be used to accuse of individual Nazis as war criminals?
All of them.
And you remember?
All of them were. They were all very, very bad.
But do you remember anything specific where you could say that you saw this man killing somebody or something like this?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What was the composition of the inmates? In other words, how many were there?
500.
And what ages were they?
From 18, mostly 18, 20, 22, and then there were a few mothers with their children, about 5, 6 mothers.
They were all women, and they were all Jews?
All Jews.
Where did they come from? What towns?
Užhorod, Seredne, from Hungarian were a few there, from Maramuresh, you know.
So they were all Hungarian?
All Hungarians.
What did the work consist of?
Munition factories, like I said, but I told you what we did. We didn't work in the factories. We like instead of transportation, we had unload the trucks, and then take put the munition on the trucks and from the trucks in the bunkers.
Were there capos?
Capos, yeah.
Were they good or bad?
Well, there were 2 sisters, capos, Jewish girls. I can't say that they were bad. They weren't bad. They came from Romanian, from Satmar. There were 3 sisters and a mother. So one was the Lagerälteste, one was the capo. But I cannot say that they were bad. They sometimes hit the girls, but just when they were forced to. They really didn't mean to harm anybody. Just when the SS was standing there and they said, you have to beat them up, she did. Because otherwise, if she didn't hit them hard enough, she was beaten up in front of everybody.
What was the food like?
The food, we had black coffee in the morning, nothing else. Lunchtime when we worked, they brought us hot soup. And in the evening we had a little soup and a slice of bread.
And what was the daily routine? And at what time did you get up?
5 o'clock in the morning we got up. And
there was appel or no?
Appel in the morning, and then we had a black coffee, and then like 6 o'clock in the morning we went to work already. It was still very dark, and we worked till 7, 8 in the evening, and 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock we came home. Some girls worked nights, and some worked during the day. Excuse me, let me just close the door.
Were people killed?
2 girls got killed.
Why?
For no reason. They used to beat us up every week. So one girl didn't let herself hit hard enough. So they just give her a shot in her head, and that was it. And they buried her there.
And who was it who killed her? The Germans or none?
The German.
The Germans?
The German. The SS.
When was this?
In January 1945.
Were there any actions in the camp?
Like
Do you know what
what?
it is? There were no actions in the camp.
No.
Were there any attempts to escape?
No.
Was there an organized underground?
No.
Was there a planned resistance movement?
No.
Were there any contacts with the outside?
2 girls had non-Jewish Jewish husbands, in Hungarian. So they probably, as far as I know, they mailed 2 letters to their husbands, and they got caught.
What happened to them?
They took them away, and they were in a prison someplace else for a couple of days, and they were beaten daily, and then they brought them back, but very, very sick.
They lived?
Until we liberated, yes. Then after that, I don't know what happened.
Were there any attempts at cultural activity?
No.
Were there any children in the camp?
No.
What were the relations between the Jewish inmates? Was there antagonism between groups from the same town, between groups from different towns, or between, well, they were all Hungarian Jews, so...
Very, very friendly with one another. All the girls were like one.
Did you receive help from fellow prisoners?
I didn't need it. Well, they couldn't give you any help anyway. They had nothing. Everybody had the same thing.
Were you ever sick there?
Yes.
From what?
Well, I was lifting a box of the munition, and it fell on my foot, and my foot got swollen. It's still a mark on it.
How did you recover?
They took me home. 2 girls dragged me home, and there was not a hospital, but they had like when you go to a doctor, an office there.
Mm-hmm.
So they let me stay there for 3 days. And
was it Revere?
Revere. And they gave me nothing, just they told me to stay there. They let me stay 2 days there.
That Revere was run by the Germans or by the
Germans?
Jews?
By the Germans, that they had 2 nurses, Jewish nurses.
So it was
from
official?
The inmates.
The camp knew about it?
Yes, of course.
And it was a real doctor, or it was a...
No, just the 2 women.
Who were real nurses?
Who knows? We know if they were nurses.
What kind of clothing did you wear?
Just they gave us a coat in the winter time and a dress. Nothing, no underwear, no stockings, no nothing.
It was civilian clothing or uniforms?
Civilian.
What kind of sanitary conditions were there?
No sanitary conditions.
Did anybody receive mail?
No.
Packages?
Nothing.